If Rhiannon, if you want to hit the record, we are recording. Excellent. I'd like to thank you all so much for coming. I know you've all been troopers. This whole year has just been a smorgasbord of virtual connectivity, which is on the one hand fantastic. On the other hand, I don't know about you, but I am looking forward to rest after we're done today. And fortunately, where I live, tomorrow is a stat holiday, so I get tomorrow off. Very, very much looking forward to that. And so we're here today to talk about mentoring in the SCA. And this is a topic that is very near to my heart. And it's something that I've both been a mentee and I've been a mentor. And I suspect many of you may be in a similar position in your lifetime in the SCA. And I noted in many of the course descriptions, class descriptions, there's a lot of overlap between what I'm going to talk today about and what you may have heard in other sessions. Mentoring is very much about renewal, rejuvenating groups, renewal of individual members, renewal of positions, of offices, of different roles. And it's something that I wholeheartedly support within my barony. I'm in my second year as a territorial baroness, so it is something that I am endorsing very strongly within my barony. Prior to being the territorial baroness, I was an officer, and it's something that even as an event steward and as a peer, I really look to mentoring to provide support for newer members in the SCA, members of our community who are seeking opportunities to expand their experience, but to do it in a way that is supported, that provides them with a system and a network that allows them to have that growth in a safe way, so they don't feel like they're jeopardizing their sanity and mental health and well-being as well. So I'm going to share my screen. I won't be able to see your chat. So Rhiannon, if you could let me know if there are, well, I'm going to move that back over here. If there are folks who have questions or comments, please feel free to interject and let me know. Mentoring is actually a really big subject, and some trades, some professions such as social workers, teachers, guidance counselors within high schools, mentoring is a big part of the work that they do. My profession is actually privacy and records management. So in my work, I think of mentoring as the education and training that I provide to create better information literacy in my professional community. I'm seeing a couple of chat there. Okay, that's good. All right, so my name is Baroness Skaya Inyan Kune. I am in the barony of Rising Waters, which is in the very cold, very snowy Niagara region of Ontario, in the Kingdom of Eldemere. And if you ever get a chance to come visit in the future, then you're all welcome to come visit. So, all right, there we go. So here's the session description. So we're talking about relationships between two individuals where one tends to have more experience, more knowledge, and some connections, a better network, a strong network, and is able to pass along some of these pieces to another less experienced member within a specific area. It could be teaching, stewarding, it could be local, it could be kingdom, it could be society level. Works at every level. So I'd like to talk to you about why mentoring is an ideal approach to providing support for new service-oriented members who just want to give more to the community, but they may be new to service, or they want to expand or grow in that particular area. And supporting the engagement in service roles while avoiding that burnout piece. So that mental health and wellness, to me, is an important piece to why mentoring is a really good route to take. And before I start, I'd like to thank Rhiannon for being our moderator today. Thank you so much, Rhiannon. I really appreciate the work that you're going to be doing for us and have probably doing all weekend. Now, our objectives today, we're going to look at what mentoring actually is, what the roles are, how to prepare for mentoring, the principles of mentoring, and some strategies. And mentoring is somewhat like a cycle. So we'll talk about that as well. And you'll see, I've tried to put in some graphics. I'm very visual oriented. So essentially, when I have a new mentee as a mentor, a lot of what my initial work in building that relationship is taking some of the chaotic or chaos oriented thoughts they have about a subject, a role, or an event-based role or an office-based role, and helping them to make sense of it, make some logical sense of it. This is not to imply I do anything with string. I don't. And I do nothing with string. So why mentoring? Well, the key to mentoring is that it needs to be a trusted relationship. It needs to have that confidentiality between the two individuals, and it's a meaningful commitment between the two people, both people. The concept is pretty new in the SCA. I'm not experienced across the whole of the known world, but it's not very rare in nonprofit organizations or non-government organizations. It's pretty common, in fact, for mentoring to be how a new staff member might learn the ropes of a nonprofit organization. And many are actually founded on or based on a strong foundation of mentoring to build and retain a healthy workforce. Like volunteer organizations, like the SCA. I've also been a scouter with the Canada Scouts, for the past 7 years in various roles, including group commissioner. So in an organization such as the SCA or Scouts, where the reliance is on volunteers, unpaid members who are going to do a lot of work, throw a lot of energy and personal investment and engagement in the work that they're doing to support the community, it is vital to ensure that we support those volunteers, they don't experience that burnout, but that they can have the health and energy to react quickly to change, develop, adapt, and regenerate over time within the individuals and within the group itself. So mentoring has evolved to include a wide range of activities. So it could include allocating individuals who can respond to queries that another individual may have, giving moral support, to schemes that border on counseling, and we'll talk about that to some degree, given the complexity of the needs of the mentee. We'll talk about different circumstances as well. So let's define mentoring a little bit more. So Eric Parslow, who is a researcher who focuses on social work, he defines it as to support and encourage people to manage their own learning in order that they may maximize their potential, develop their skills, improve their performance, and become the person they want to be. This is very much, the definition is very much with an end in sight. Like they have a goal, a desired state, to use an IT reference, and they have their current state and they want to get to that desired state. So as a Laurel, when I have an apprentice, I have a mentoring relationship with my apprentices. It's important for me to understand what that end state is. What is that goal? So particular words to draw attention to in this definition: supporting and encouraging, suggest that it's non-directive. I don't necessarily tell my apprentices what to do unless I'm giving them homework, which I do. Manage their own learning, suggests an agency lying with the mentee. I can ask my apprentices to do something, doesn't mean that they will do it, but if they do have a task in mind, then I feel my role is to support them in achieving the success in that task. Maximize potential, develop their skill, improve their performance, identifies again that spirit of growth and that development that we're looking to support within our newer members or less experienced members. And the person they want to be is again emphasizing that goal. So agency within the mentee, and as well achieving the goal that the mentee identifies. So what it is not. So mentoring is not really coaching. It does have elements similar to coaching. Mentors do offer some of their life experience, knowledge to help mentees, but it's not intended to be directive, instruct, like you must do this, specifically, or to take too much control of the relationship. It really needs to be a partnership rather than necessarily a teacher student type of relationship. And coaching typically requires minimal or highly controlled sharing of knowledge and information. For myself as a mentor, I find I often learn as a mentor as almost as much as I did as a mentee. So there are benefits to both roles within the mentoring relationship. And it's important to recognize that the skills involved in mentoring, coaching, and counseling, there are significant overlaps. So there's definitely some shared characteristics here. Now, specifically, and I truly believe this, is empathy, listening, and asking questions is key. Communication, empathy, and active listening for both parties. So how does it fit into the SCA? I'm not going to say that I know exactly how it fits and this is how it fits. This is not an exhaustive list. This has only been my experience. So in individual relationships, as an event steward, I know that there are a certain number of people in my barony who tend to be the people who do the event stewarding or the feast stewarding, or run a small event like a set of classes. Even in a virtual environment, there tends to be certain number of individuals that they're always the ones that we go to get the show on the road. Now, that experience as an event steward, what I started doing a few years ago, I started talking with younger members, newer members of our group, and asking them if they would be my assistant event steward. I didn't say, I'm going to teach you how to be an event steward, and in 2 years' time, you're going to be an event steward. I never said that. I asked them to be my assistant. And in being my assistant, they essentially kind of came along for the ride with me. And slowly over time, over events, they would gain more and more of the responsibilities until it came to the point where I would say, we need to put an event bid in for this event. Why don't you give a crack, get a crack in putting an event bid together. I'm happy to help you to put it together. You've seen what my bids have looked like. If you want, I'll even look at it before you submit it. And now I have a couple of newer members who they're running the show when it comes to an event. I feel kind of like a mama bird watching her baby bird take flight, holding on to the edge of the branch, hoping that everything works out great. But externally, I am the biggest cheerleader. The other piece is the persona-based individual relationship. So as a peer, one of the roles that I feel is really important, not just for those that are my apprentices or my students, but for anyone who comes to me and asks about research in the SCA and questions or for some guidance, I feel this is very much the same type of dynamic that happens. I'm not running the show necessarily in the relationship. That relationship is a partnership. Tell me what you want, and I will give you some advice or guidance to help you get there. But the work needs to be equitable, needs to be on both sides of the partnership. Group renewal, and I've mentioned this is at every level. A few years ago in our barony, we started having deputy roles. Some of them are unofficial deputy roles for all of our officers. So I was signet before I became Baroness. And I knew in becoming Baroness, I was going to have to possibly share the role. So I found a deputy of a lovely young woman who joined our barony after moving with her Lord husband from another area, very interested in arts and science. She came to every scribal meeting and I talked to her about it. And she wasn't sure if she had the experience to step into the role, same path. She became my deputy. conversations that we'd have would essentially be the conversations I didn't have with anybody about scroll orders and setting up guest speakers to come to our Scrabble gatherings. And in a virtual environment, how do we generate greater engagement with our Scrabble artisans? So rather than just having those conversations or not having those conversations at all by myself, I had a partner who I could have those conversations with. And when the time came for my partner, my deputy, to step forward and become the signet, she was already partly running the show. And when we didn't have any other applicants for the role, but we did a poll of support online for her, and every single person said, she's already doing the job. She's doing a great job. We want her to do it. So that gave her more confidence. She had confidence through the experience of being deputy, and then even more confidence when we ran the poll. And she could see that people were saying that they supported her in that position. Now, I've already spoken to event-based roles. I think that this piece here, along with the officer roles, these are so important for group rejuvenation. There was a time in my barony when really officer and event-based roles, it was really pass the hat to the next person. You took the hat from the person on the other side of you. So, there's this sense of fatigue, true fatigue, with this cycle continually on, with people not really getting a rest or a respite from having responsibilities within the group. And while I truly enjoy and want to support my community, I think it's really important that not only do you as an individual get a chance for that break to revitalize your energies, it's really important to allow new people the opportunity to express themselves in that role, because they'll bring something different to it, to, maybe shake things up, maybe a different perspective, but that new energy revitalizes the group as a whole. And I can't say enough how beneficial that has been within our barony. So I'm going to talk about the 3 C's of mentorship: consultant, counselor, and cheerleader. And I've already said it's not counseling, but there are overlaps, and here's where the overlap lies. So to varying degrees, your role as a mentor will be comprised of these 3 different roles to different percentages. I couldn't find a great picture to demonstrate what that would look like. In some contexts, when my mentee doesn't want a lot of direct mentoring happening, I'm really a consultant and a cheerleader. They don't really come to me. If it's a newer member with less experience and they need more support, I have a stronger emphasis as a counselor in that relationship. That these 3 roles have unique benefits to add to that relationship. So as a consultant, this is the most obvious role that a mentor will play. And mentors in this role are responsible for sharing their own insights gained through their own years of experience, and they often are experienced in areas that the mentees are not particularly experienced in themselves, and can gain insight from the mentor that will save them time and resources. This is the key piece. So, and one of the benefits to the mentee is they don't have to rebuild the roads of Rome. I don't know what the idiom is. When you've already done it through your own experience, there's no need, in my mind, for someone to have to make the same mistakes that you made in order to get the same benefit of that experience when they can learn from you. The mentor in this role frees up the mentee to focus on new issues, new challenges that are unique to that particular goal. So for example, we want to have our traditional event in our barony, which is called the Lady Mary Memorial Tournament. Well, this past year, we couldn't have it on site for obvious reasons. So definitely novel challenges we hadn't experienced before. And fortunately, we have a great group of people who were able to lend some experience to how do we rework that in new ways. It worked okay last year, and hopefully it'll be even better this year. So, counselor.
So Elith put a comment in chat. Learn from my mistakes. You don't have the time to make them all yourself.
Really good point. Really good point. And that's part of the frustration of being new or less experienced in an area. And if as a mentor, you can alleviate that frustration, you improve the possibility that that person will do it again. And that's really the goal. When you have a new event steward, a new officer, you want them to do it again, right? So we're growing our group by providing them with this kind of support. So as a counselor, maybe Yoda was a counselor. I think he was to Luke. I think it was really important. Really not, it's out of SCA imagery, but all right. As a counselor, the key piece to this is listening. As a mentor, you don't have to give all the answers. Sometimes our most valuable activity that we can do is act as a sounding board. It can be easy to point out the mistakes or let somebody know, oh, you could just do it this way. But sometimes individuals don't want to know how to do it. They just want someone to talk to. It may go into, how would you do it? What do you think? But that listening piece, active listening, is really important and allows you as a mentor to provide more reflective, more insightful advice when it comes time to offer advice. And in these instances, the mentor plays the role of a counselor and provides guidance, but not answers, right? Because at the same time, there is some satisfaction for an individual to find those answers themselves, right? Now, it can be tempting for a mentor to revert from counselor to consultant. So it depends on A, the circumstances, and B, the individuals in the relationship in terms of which kinds of role you're going to flick between or switch between. And the answer is not 100% clear. The answer is always going to be, it depends. Depends on the people, depends on the situation. And also on the mentee's learning style. They may not want that direct hand-in-hand mentoring approach. They may want to have somebody who has that receptive learning sounding board role rather than that hands-on experience. When it comes to critical business skills, so for those of you who are exchequers, and if we talk about event stewards and gate staff, these are all roles where mentoring does provide support. And it's important to play, for the mentor to play the counselor role in these particular activities, but let the mentee discover the answer on their own. You can guide them to the resources that will help them find the answer, but it's important that they have that moment of discovery as well, because that gives them that sense of accomplishment and achievement on their own, even though you've provided them with that guidance to where to find that answer. The other piece here is that if you've guided them to the resources to find that answer, that's a resource they can go to in the future and allow them to be independent as they move forward in that role. All right. Cheerleader. I do this a lot. I do this a lot. Even people who I'm not formally a mentor for, in addition to constructive feedback and advice that a mentor can make, I provide support and enthusiasm. And I would add to this advocacy. I advocate for those individuals who are my deputies or have my apprentices, my students, my assistant event stewards. I'll advocate on their behalf, and I'll do it in a way that they will know that I have done that. So it acts as, in two ways, advocating for them and as a cheerleader, so they can see my explicit, I don't want to say praise, but positive response to the work that they've put in, the energy that they have invested. And in starting a new role and gaining new responsibilities, it can be encouraging to know that your mentor is rooting for you, is supporting you, particularly in a public way with other people. Mentors should help to celebrate the successes of your mentees, no matter how big or small. And sometimes a small success for one mentee is a leap for another. So it's important to recognize what those successes mean to those individuals. Now, most mentors will know when it's appropriate to play these 3 different roles, but it doesn't mean that the mentees should just let their mentor figure it out on their own. The important part here is that communication between the partners in this relationship. The mentees should be open and honest about what they need and what is expected from their mentor. I think this is a very important piece to this partnership. And in my experience, I find I consistently have to repeat and support my mentee to know that they can talk to me and tell me what their expectation is. What do they want from the relationship? If they don't know right away, check in during that, the path to that goal, to have that conversation again. And that's something that I do periodically with my mentees, with my apprentices, and so on. At the end of the day, whether the mentor is a consultant, counselor, or cheerleader, transparency and communication, honesty and trust, these are important aspects in a successful relationship. So being a mentor is more than about telling somebody what to do. It means sharing expertise with a consultant mindset, guiding the mentee along their journey without giving away all the answers, and being a cheerleader when that mentee needs it the most. So how do you build this relationship? So here's a couple of different things that I've tried. I think it's dependent on the individuals involved and depending on the relationship you have with them. Some of these techniques, strategies, and steps will work for you for one individual, but they won't work for another individual. So here are a grab bag of tips in building that relationship. So first, talk to your mentee. That seems pretty logical. Exchange background information. Sometimes shared background provides a lot of support in building that relationship. Before I was elevated to becoming a member of the Laurel, my Laurel, who I was apprenticed to, she and I both worked on doctorate programs. We were both very academic in our approach to arts and science. So that was definitely a shared background where we were able to bond and build that relationship. Take time to get to know each other. It's a little more difficult now that we're in a virtual reality. In a real on-site opportunity, inviting somebody over for a cup of tea or a glass of wine is always my go-to. Now it's checking in with somebody on Facebook and seeing if people are doing okay and asking how people are doing on a project. Share past mentoring experiences and those who've influenced you, how that worked for you, and implying or inferring how it could work for your potential mentee. Determine personal expectations of the relationships. In building a partnership in any juncture, this piece is really vital. In order to have a satisfying experience, you need to know what your roles are and what the goal is as well. What do you need from your mentor? What do you need from the mentee? What is your expectations? My apprentices know that I give homework. So before they agree, they have to know homework is likely. Define the desired outcomes. So short-term goals, long-term goals, what do those look like to your mentee? What are they trying to obtain? What are they trying to accomplish? And how are they hoping this relationship will support achieving those goals? Candidly, share personal assumptions and limitations. This piece is really important. In some cases, the mentee-mentor relationship means that at some points the mentor, if the mentee falls, the mentor needs to help to hold them up. Discuss personal and learning styles. This is again part of that assumptions, limitations, expectations, that is very much part and parcel. And candor, confidentiality, and trust are a must. So if something is shared in confidence between mentor and mentee, that your role is to maintain that confidence and not share it beyond the partnership. So I didn't find a lot of comics or cartoons about mentoring. I did find this. Tom, mentoring is about more than encouraging people to be just like you. The goal in mentoring is helping someone to become who they want to be. So it's not creating a doppelganger of yourself, but it's sharing your expertise, your experience, your passions, even in some cases, with another individual so that they can achieve who they want to be and what their desired state is. So mentoring principles include these points, but mentoring is much bigger than what I'm providing to you here today. So be prepared for that. So first, strive for mutual benefits. In the beginning, I had said that I have found mentoring valuable both as a mentee and a mentor. I have benefited from both roles. I've learned something new from my mentee and learned something new as a mentee and as a mentor. The relationship should be defined at the beginning as mutually beneficial. Each participant is committed to the relationship by choice. Each should be able to openly share their goals in the relationship and work collaboratively to achieve them. Agree on confidentiality. I feel like I'm really emphasizing trust, confidentiality, and candor here. And I do that in a meaningful way. I think that is so important, that for the mentor and mentee to have a positive experience, they both need to be honest and open about what their needs are in order to make that relationship work. Without the mutually understood ability to speak freely, the relationship is unlikely to reach its full potential and be truly satisfying for both members. So commit to honesty. Be honest and open in what your expectations are, your limits, and what you hope to get out of it. Lead by example. Those of us who are peers or nobility, this is something we must take to heart. But even before becoming a peer, becoming a member of nobility, most of us in the SCA look to the romanticized medieval world of lords and ladies and hoping to lead by example in the nobility in which we conduct ourselves within the SCA. It's actually one of the things that I really love about our community, and that we all strive to do this. Listen and learn. Mutual benefit and honesty can only be achieved when both members are able to feel their viewpoints are heard and respected. So that active listening piece. Mentors especially need to remember that the relationship is not about them. It's really about the two of you, the partnership, the relationship, and the goal of the mentee. Building that working relationship, what I tend to do is actually, I've said construct it, structure it, a working relationship, regular check-ins. I actually schedule regular check-ins. And I think that in a virtual, digital supported world, that piece is really important because it's not just SCA stressors, it's real life stressors as well. And I think as a mentor in the SCA, I need to be very cognizant and compassionate to those stressors that my mentees may be experiencing. And finally, be flexible. So it might help for a mentoring relationship to have those defined goals. And the process is important, but sometimes the process can change, and sometimes those expectations can change. And something that worked initially in the relationship, so something that may be more counseling based, well, as you're progressing through the relationship to achieve those goals, perhaps gears need to be shifted and your role needs to shift to a more dominant consultant role or cheerleading role or what have you as you progress through that relationship. There are some say there are 4 stages. I read a couple of other books and a few articles that talk about different numbers of stages. I'm going to present you with 4. Preparation, which we talked about in preparing to become a mentor. Negotiating, where you're determining the expectations, the goals, and the roles, and enabling that growth, that active part of the mentoring relationship where you are working with your mentee or with your mentor to achieve those goals, and closure. And this is the piece that often gets left out, that closure piece. Now, these sequential phases, they build things. For one period, developing to officer role, or connections just listed as on. Thumbs up if you can.
Sky, I think we lost your connection. You're cutting out.
Jack, I'm so sorry.
We're good.
Can you hear now?
Off and on. You're cutting out. I think it's your connection. Right now your video is frozen. Luckily, it's a good video, a good facial expression.
Recording.
Activity. Talk. We've only got a minute. I'd like to quickly about along the mentor. Active listening. But I'd also like to suggest giving feedback, and how this works as a two-way communication path, providing timely support. Particularly, I found this particularly key as an event steward and a fee steward, as an experienced steward. I know when the hiccups might likely occur, so I'm able to manage when timely advice might be needed, when my mentee might be experiencing some stress or an increase in need of focus of their energy. But I also look to peers of mine, colleagues who've done the same kind of work, had the same kinds of roles, to get feedback from other sources as well. I don't think of the mentor-mentee necessarily as being a closed loop. I think of my role as a mentor as being almost like a doorway to a network of support for my mentee. And if it's an area that I'm not particularly experienced in specifically, then I strongly think that my role is helping to connect the two individuals, my mentee, with other people who can give them that direct knowledge. Use your time productively. Sometimes using that time productively means having a cup of tea together, whether it's virtually or on your porch, hopefully not in winter because it's cold. Evaluating your goals and deadlines throughout the process. Goals can shift and deadlines can extend. Give constructive criticism, but also accept that and reflect on the criticism you receive. In the relationships I've built, I really emphasize that my mentee needs to be able to give me constructive feedback as well as the mentor. Am I doing a good job? Am I giving them what they need to achieve their goals? Advise on what you know, but don't be afraid to admit what you don't know. This is really important. Don't BS your mentee. Refer them to resources. Sometimes that is the strongest thing you can do as a mentor, is provide them with the resources they need in order to move forward. And don't be afraid of having difficult conversations. Having that confidentiality, that candor, that trust in the relationship means that it's important that you would be able to go to your mentee and have potentially difficult conversations. If you've heard, gossip is a horrible thing. And if you've heard something that is, does not reflect well on your mentee or your mentor, it's important to have those conversations and get to the crux of any challenges like that. And finally, as a cheerleader, celebrate the small successes. Celebrate the big ones too, of course. So I've mentioned conclusion. The end is at the beginning. Consider what you want your mentoring relationship to look like when it's done. Be sensitive to when the relationship is done. Find a personal way to express your feelings about the experience. I tend to give my mentees tokens to thank them for their service, to thank them for what they've done. So giving and receiving thanks is a really important part of that relationship. And even if you're disappointed with the outcome, so it wasn't achieved, maybe you didn't break even on the event, it's important to identify and express the positive benefits that were gained during that relationship, and take time to consider what you've learned and identify what you would do differently in your next mentoring relationship. And finally, celebrate. Celebration is a key component to celebrating the mentoring relationship, the new relationship you have with this individual, and the goals they've achieved. The mentoring can include a variety of different elements, and it's important to understand where those elements come into play in each unique relationship. So that's the end of the slides. Thank you so much for listening to my blathering on. Do you have any questions? Oh, sound's still breaking up.
Excuse me, I have to leave, but thank you very much. This has been very helpful. I'm going off to take a class at the Getty Museum.
Ooh.
Oh,
Ooh. I have a question. Will you be are you interested in or able to share your slides as a file?
so I've already shared the slides as a PDF file with the event staff, who will make it
Oh.
available to our participants.
Thank you so much.
Already working ahead.
Edith is raising her hand. Go ahead, Edith.
I have several proteges. I'm a Pelican, and some of them I work beautifully with, and one of them I have a problem with, not because we can't work with each other, but it's a behavior issue on his part. And I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to turn that into, we still need to work together and how can I help you, when I think he's been a bad actor. I don't want to throw him to the wind. I would like to find a way to help him.
Yeah, no, I've seen similar concerns. And one of the things I would think, like right off the bat, is to have that frank conversation about expectations, both on your part and on their part as well. In terms of, and this is a nuance which I didn't really talk about, but is a real nuance I think that we need to capture, and seems relevant to your concern, that the expectation for the other, but the expectation for yourself.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, it's actually something he did mundanely that triggers me. I mean, it's not anything he's done illegally. I'm not talking about that, would be something else entirely, but it's hard for me to get past it, and I just am trying to work on myself on this one.
Sometimes it might also be helping them find the right mentor for where they are at the moment.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's realizing that maybe your relationship isn't the best one for either of you.
Right. I hadn't thought of that, but that's totally, I mean, I should have. I have 2 brain cells, but not today.
Yeah, Ailey, I was going to say the same, something similar. It goes back to what Sky was saying about know when it's the end. Know when it's time to break that relationship. I think most of us have had a point, or many of us have had a point where we get to a point in the mentor-mentee relationship where it's not working for whatever reason, and it's just time to break it. And I've done this both in mundanely and in the SCA. So
Well,
I almost think it would be easier if it were a mundane situation as opposed to, I mean, a relationship as opposed to an SCA relationship. I think it would be easier.
your mentee is part of your family. And if this person is not somebody that you no longer want to sit across the table and dine with, then it is time to have that conversation of we're just not a fit anymore. I have seen that happening a lot in this past year with the way people are acting personally on social media or whatever, where I have seen Pelicans and Laurel say, I'm sorry, we just can't, we're just not a fit anymore.
It actually wasn't that. It predates this whole, it's not political and it's not pandemic related. It predates most of that. And it's like, oh, okay, how do I do this? I just like, oh, I gotta just do it.
So the art of having difficult conversations has a lot of content out in the World Wide Web. That has been
Yeah.
helpful for me in the past to get into the right mindset for that sort of thing. I know that Isabel has her hand raised, and Tracy also had her video hand raised. So Isabel?
Hi there, yes. My question was, I've noticed in my kingdom, I'm from the kingdom of Artemisia. There are some people who feel like, well, I can't be a mentor because I'm not a peer. And I'm not a peer, but I have experience mentoring outside of the SCA, and I was wondering if that is appropriate for people who are not peers to be informal mentors for other people, especially like my background. I'm looking to be the shadow lane of my group, and I want to be a resource for new people coming into the SCA.
Before I as an event steward, because I started off working on event staff, I was actively working as a mentor already. Develop CA. So I would say there's definitely informal mentoring going on. And if you find yourself, then very much doing that.
Okay, thank you.
And Tracy, did you still have a question or comment?
Well, I was just replying to the, has anyone been involved in a mentoring aspect? But yes, to address what's been talked about right now is that I had a long road to my peerage. And so I said, well, I had a lot of people looking to me for some guidance. So I'm like, well, I can give them that guidance, even though I'm not a peer. So I developed a mentoring relationship with them. So yeah, you can do it if you're not a peer. It's no big deal. It's what we should all be doing a little bit in the SCA, especially those of us who've been around for a long time, whether you're a peer or not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Really good points.
Thanks.
And mentioned wanting to be a chatelaine. Someone mentioned being a chatelaine. That was the first office. That was the first office I held when I lived in Ontario, and as a chatelaine.
That's very nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward. That's very nice to know. I'm looking forward to stepping up, branching out and finding new people who might be interested in coming into the SCA.
Excellent. Good luck.
Thank you.
Have cards made and carry them with you.
Really good point.
Yeah, business cards with links to the SCA, especially your local group. It can be very useful, especially for recruiting purposes. I was going to say also, anyone can be a mentor. You don't need to be a peer. If you have knowledge and you have experience in an area that you can share, be a mentor. Mentor somebody. Mentor a child if you feel that child is going to be interested. It doesn't matter. I was a mentor outside of the SCA in my mundane job long before I ever became a peer in the West, and long before I ever became a mentor. So anybody can be a mentor.
So I think there is some people that might get a little sensitive if you use certain terms, between mentor or mentee. So like, for example, if you're not a knight, it may be problematic if you're like, oh yeah, my squire so-and-so, blah, 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 to refer to that person as your mentee or your apprentice or your protege, etc. But that may not be the case in all cases. What I would like to hear from some peers about that, if that's an okay question.
I can jump in on that issue. Are you guys there?
Yeah, we're
I can
here.
see and hear you. We're just listening.
Okay.
We can see and hear
We're
you.
waiting with anticipation for you, Mari.
Oh, okay.
With bated breath, even.
As a multi-peer, for me, I really feel that that those titles are exclusive to the folks that are using them. So for the knight, the squire, the pelican, the protege, the laurel, the apprentice. My students tend to be multifaceted, and being that I have the benefit of having multiple peerages, basically they get to be an all-in-one. I often joked with Helga that, she was my proto quad. And so, now she just has one more to go. Go get it, girl. But I have no problem with having non-peers saying these are my students, because especially with rapier, before we got mod, we had a whole lot of white scarves that would have cadets, but then you had people that kind of fell outside that system that still had the knowledge because they were coming in, unlike heavy, where really there's only one place to learn that. With rapier, we had people, in Sacramento, we had 14 different rapier groups that were non-SCA at all. So you'd get these people coming in that had huge amounts of knowledge, and to be their student was a privilege because they didn't understand the SCA, but they understood fencing. So our job was to teach them SCA, and their job was to teach us fencing, and to be their student worked out great. And then they, in turn, even though they may or may not be my technical mentee, they were somebody that I could teach and explain to them how the structure of the SCA work and how our sociological interactions work. So that worked out really well. I have a couple of people that I see as my teachers in fencing now, but as a multi-peer, being their cadet or being their student has an awkward social balance to it. And so they are still my teacher. My current student, Dietrich, that's his SCA name, trying to kick back into that with not being online all the time and using mundane names. But my current student, Dietrich, is learning from me all the SCA things, but he comes from a HEMA background and so coaches me in doing the rapier and those things. So that dynamic goes back and forth both ways. And he is my student and my apprentice, but at the same point, I take the fencing feedback from him. And so that relationship works fine. With Helga, I took the equestrian from her because that was her bailiwick and she knew far more than I did. So I think it's important to be able to not come in and be the parent per se, but be able to understand that in mentoring adults, you get that give and take, and that they don't necessarily need to be a peer to have very valuable insight into things to teach.
Thank you, Mari. I have to go to another class, but I really appreciate your response. And anyone else, please feel free to comment if you wanted to, tell me your views too.
Well, I was going to go off of what Marty was saying about